Still picking up.
Somebody say something out loud.
Power on your mics for me, guys. We're just gonna do a quick check. Testing. After that, I turn yours down.
Can you hear us?
Testing, 1, 2.
It's coming over, Chris.
We're good? Turn the outline.
Yeah, I can hear.
Perfect.
You guys are 3.
Who's mic 3? Oh,
That's us.
are you on?
Jen, what we are now.
Okay.
Can you hear?
Doesn't seem to be too loud.
How about now?
You can hear it? Okay. Try one more time.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
No. Yeah.
And Jen Kelly just joined remotely. We have Miguel on as well. Commissioner Harnish, we can start whenever you're ready.
Perfect. Well, thank you,
Recording in
everyone.
progress.
Thank you, everyone, for coming today. It's a great Friday day. Traffic was light. I appreciate you taking your time here to join us today. So without any further ado, we'll call the meeting to order. I now call the second quarter meeting of the Colorado Groundwater Commission to order. Commissioners, as we determine a quorum, take a look at the agenda, see if we have any revisions so that we can accept it right away. Mr. Nielsen, will you determine a quorum?
Mark Arnish,
Here?
Miguel Diaz, Angie Fowler,
Here?
Glenn Freehawk,
Here.
Tim Hume,
Here.
Dave Keeler,
Here.
Jim Noble,
Here.
Tim Potler,
Here.
Scott Kietmeyer,
Here.
Kevin Ryan, Kelly Romero Haney,
Here.
Eric Ski. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Nielsen. As you can see, the chair to me is empty today, but we have State Engineer Kevin Ryan on with us on remote. All of you out of there in the audience, please help me to see, because Kevin's likely going to wave if he has something to say. So help me out if you see that happen. And then we also have Kelly Romero Haney with us as well online, so we have a full slate. Okay, have you had a chance to review the agenda? And if so, is there a motion? It's been moved by Commissioner Freehoff. Is there a second? Second. Commissioner Noble, discussion. All those in favor of approving the agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, agenda is approved. Approval of the minutes of the meeting of February 24th. Have you all had a chance to take a look at the minutes?
So move.
Move to approve?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Hume. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, minutes are approved. We're up to agenda item number 4, report to the executive director by Mr. Kevin Ryan. Kevin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can everyone hear me okay? Can you give me that thumbs up that you guys have? Thank you very, very much. First of all, thanks, Mr. Chair and Commissioners for allowing me to do this remotely, and for the staff for always making this work. When we moved the meeting, at the last meeting, when we moved this meeting, it created a conflict that, as many things, can only be reconciled when we do things virtually, so this really helped me out to be able to do this virtually. Thank you for that. These meetings are very important to me. And with that, I'll start my report. And the first thing I want to mention is, back in February, after the last meeting, but certainly since then, we had a significant retirement at the Division of Water Resources. Our Deputy Director, Mike Sullivan, retired at the end of February. And that's the bad news. The good news is that we were able to hire a replacement, not hire, but promote a replacement from a resource that was very ready and very accomplished and very competent. And I think you all know by now that Tracy Kozloff was promoted to the position of Deputy Director, which is a little bit different from the Deputy State Engineer position she was in before. And I just want to thank her for stepping up to that. We really needed her to do that. And she's in the process of filling her vacancy that I think we'll be able to do that fairly quickly. I want to mention, as I have in the past, the measurement rules in Division 6. And just a reminder, that's the first time in the state, first time anywhere that we've had measurement rules for surface water diversions. And it was a good place to break ground because the need is there. We have Colorado River compact issues that really create the need for better measurement, both for the benefit of the state and for our water users. And right now, that process has gone through the water court. We have statements of opposition. We're working with different parties to get stipulated agreements to let those rules go forward. And I'm very optimistic. It's really working well, and a lot of it has to do with great stakeholder work that we did throughout the process to make sure we have rules that really work for people. So that's good news. I want to touch on the South Platte, and we didn't really talk about the South Platte much in previous years, but for the last year we've talked about the South Platte, and that means we're talking about the Perkins County Canal. And this is another one of those reports that I can report that there's not much to report to you. Just little things. We know that Nebraska is still planning to move ahead with the Perkins County Canal. Since we last met, I did give Nebraska a letter commenting on their water supply availability analysis. That was less of a contentious letter and more of a friendly, helpful letter. Here are some things you may not have considered, and just a heads it up for you. So I hope that's something that they took to heart, and I know we've gotten a response on that. But there also was a report that I saw yesterday that Nebraska's Appropriations Committee in the legislature appears to have granted the funding for them to move ahead with the full amount to continue their plans to build the Perkins County Canal. And of course, I'm staying in close touch with that, and our Attorney General's office is staying in close touch with that every step of the way. So we are, of course, being watchful, all the while recognizing that there is a compact provision that allows construction of the canal. And of course, if it's done according to the compact, then that can move ahead. That's the key. I want to mention a couple things about Republican River Basin, but Chair Arnish, I believe Deb Daniel is probably out there in the audience, and I don't want to say too much. Is Deb there?
She's gonna get her.
I don't see her. No.
Okay, but
Chris, is she online?
She is on remotely today.
okay. Either way, Deb, I think I'm going to leave most of this report to you, but I will say in the Republican, that's that flattering, the district has made great progress on retiring up to that 10,000 acre mark. That is our first threshold, our first deadline. I'm going to leave it to Deb to say more about that, but I also want to report that Monday there is a signing event whereby our director, Dan Gibbs, as the executive of the Department of Natural Resources, sorry, let me say that again, as the executive director of the Department of Natural Resources, will sign a new amended CREP agreement that allows for dry land farming out of the basin. And that's a really significant event because that's really going to be the first dry land CREP agreement that FSA has in the country. And so we're really excited about that. Deb, I'm going to leave that to you. I suspect you'll say more about that. The other thing I'll mention is in the Rio Grande Basin, we just finished our last compact meeting a couple weeks ago. We've got the Custody Creek compact meeting next week, and the Rio Grande compact meeting went well, and I expect that the Custody Creek meeting will go well also. And also in the Rio Grande, as I see Commissioner Diaz in my window here, the sub-district number 1, as part of their plan of water management, has submitted a new groundwater management plan really to deal with the very difficult issue of sustainability in the Rio Grande Basin. And right now, the state engineer's office, me in particular, we've looked at that and sent some questions back to the sub-district, and not really questions, but suggestions on what can be done with the plan of water management to make it something the state engineer can approve. And I just really want to publicly say thank you to the sub-district board members and the sub-district itself for really working hard to give us something that we could review and comment on. And I'm very optimistic that we can move toward a plan of water management that the sub-district can propose and that the state engineer can approve and send to the water board. And I would love to talk about the Colorado River a lot, but in the interest of time and how difficult it is to talk about, I think I'm going to stop there, Mr. Chair, and let us move along, unless there are questions for me.
Are there any questions for State Engineer Ryan? Okay, thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 5, commissioner reports. Are there any reports from the commissioners? Okay, moving on, number 6.
Mr. Chairman, I have one.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Diaz.
Sorry for being a little bit late. You know how computer technical difficulties are in the mornings, but just wanted to thank Kevin thank you for reviewing that plan and sending those stuff back to us as far as for the sub-district, but wanted to let you know that the river's running good. We got good water here in this area, and I like what I see as far as the river flows and good runoff. As we're going through the runoff now, things are moving really well in the Rio Grande Basin, so just wanted to make a comment on that. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Diaz. Are there any other reports? Okay, moving on to number 6. The hearing on request by the town of Bennett for a variance to Rule 5.3.7. That has been moved to continue at our November 17th, 2023 commission meeting. So no action required there. The variance discussion will be held in November. Similar process on number 7, the hearing on the request by Paintbrush Hills Metropolitan District for a variance to Rule 5.3.7. That has now been moved to the August meeting. So our next quarterly meeting, that variance request will be heard. Any questions on that? Okay, up to number 8, staff reports with Ms. Joanna Williams.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Joanna Williams, and I'll verbally go through the staff report that you have been provided. The first page of the report provides a summary of applications received and permitted during the last quarter. Additional details, including a breakdown of those numbers by basin, is included as Table 1. Attached Tables 2 and 3 provide a summary of pending applications that are currently actively being evaluated by staff. Page 2 of the report provides a summary of final permit status by basin, including the total number of final permits, number of final permits issued, and the number of pending conditional permits. Within the Northern High Plains, there are a total of 120 inactive wells and 240 permanently inactive wells. And those wells are listed in attached tables 4 and 5. As described on page 2 of the report, our office continues to work on a process to efficiently and effectively notify owners of wells that were required to be plugged and abandoned, but no abandonment report was received within the time period required by statute or rule. Updated tables of those wells are provided as tables 6 and 7. As part of the delay is we're working on a process to figure out how to incorporate that notification into our current permitting system to make it more efficient in the future. Under the hearing section, there were 5 new cases that came before the hearing officer during the last quarter. We have the Town of Bennett applications for determination of water rights and change of determination of water rights. Water Stoner application for determination of water rights, which was actually recently just settled. Paintbrush Hills Metropolitan District applications for determination of water rights. Luis Garcia applications for determination of water rights. And the Rodeo Dunes LLC and Platte Land and Water LLC applications for change of water rights. Under the enforcement section, during the last quarter, staff responded to complaints involving the perceived unpermitted use of wells and designated groundwater. Those complaints were investigated by staff and verified that they were in compliance. Therefore, there were no verified violations during the last quarter. Staff and the groundwater management districts continue to work with the designated basin water users found to have been in violation during the last quarter. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the commissioners have.
Any questions? Any questions for this one? Thank you very much for your report. Item number 9, report of the Attorney General by Chris Stork. Mr. Stork, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Chris Stork, the attorney for the staff of the Groundwater Commission, the Attorney General's office. Just a few short updates. As noted in the AG report, in 08 GW 71, that's the Cherokee Metropolitan District case. It's been around for a while. Staff has hired an engineer to help review the engineering that has been submitted, so that is hopefully starting to move forward. And a few other matters are dependent upon that. For the Krutzinger estate matter that was pending before the commission, no appeal was filed, so that has now been closed. And as Joanna just mentioned, there were several new matters provided. One was not listed in the AG report because it came in afterwards, the Rodeo Dunes case. That's 23 GW 08, and there's a status conference scheduled for next week. And there's 2 objectors, and staff is automatically a party, so we will be attending that, and we'll provide another update for the next Groundwater Commission meeting. We also received a request for legal services for 4 enforcements of overpumping orders for violations of those in the Republican River Basin. And we are currently drafting the complaints for those, and under statute, those are filed with the district court in the county where the well resides. Also, just to give a couple updates on matters that were listed in the report since then, the Mechanics case, 22 GW 10, a stipulation was reached in that matter, and a motion to approve it was filed on May 3rd. For Stoner, as Joanna mentioned, the objection was withdrawn in that matter and is now closed as of April 25th. And for the Camp B3 matter, 22 GW 24, the parties have indicated that the nearest stipulation to that case should be resolved in the near future. I'm available for any questions on that if there are any.
Okay, are there any questions of Mr. Stork? Yes, Mr. Commissioner Noble.
Thank you. Mr. Stark, I was just curious, just scrolling through your summary here, it looks like there aren't any hearings set for this fall. Maybe there's one, but overall there's don't appear to be.
Yes, I believe that's correct. I think there's a hearing set for the Beverly Alfrey Estate in August of actually that's August 2023, and I believe some motions will likely be filed in that matter.
Okay, good. Thanks a lot.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Stark.
Thank you.
Okay, up to agenda item number 10, district reports. Let's start with Marks Butte, Frenchman, Sandhills, and Central Yuma Groundwater Management District. Mr. Nate Midcap, you are online, I presume?
I'm unmuted, I believe.
Perfect, you have the floor.
I've been coming to these meetings for a long time, and I don't think I've ever been within the first 20 minutes of the meeting, so pretty amazing, to say the least. We need to first thank Mike Sullivan for all of his work and efforts in the Republican River Basin and everything he's done, especially for my 4 districts, and trying to keep us in compliance and live with the other 2 states, and we appreciate his efforts. And he'll be missed as a asset to the state in getting us into compact compliance. So we're going to miss him very much. We look forward to the next regime, and hopefully they do just as good a job as Mike. They got some big shoes to fill. With that, as awful, I'm not gonna say awful, but as cold as the winter was, with as much snow was covered up, it sure has turned dry in northeastern Colorado. And usually we try to do a rain dance, and that never works, so we invite Kevin Ryan back out to do his rain dance so we can get throughout there. We do have some wells running, lots of crops in the ground. Sandhills is that they're actually pre-irrigating, and that doesn't happen very often. It happened last year, the first time I've seen it happen in my 15 years here, and they're at it again this year. So dry is an understatement out here again. We certainly could use some moisture and change the weather pattern. And I think that probably, and I really need to thank staff and the Republican River District for working on farmable crep. It will be a tremendous asset to the conservation of water in these districts, and in order to get some of these at least smaller wells offline, and those producers the ability to continue their farming operations in a manner that's profitable for them. So we really appreciate the work that goes, and so I think that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Nate. Are there any questions for Nate? Thanks, Nate, for putting the hex on us in a fast meeting. Okay, up to YW Groundwater Management District. Is Kyle in the room or online? Nope, I think I saw him in here.
I didn't see Kyle remotely either.
Okay, Rickery Groundwater, Rod Mason. Rod, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Definitely the quickest I've ever given my report, I know that. Glad to be back. It's been a long time since COVID and everything. It's been an interesting winter. This is probably I've been the manager for Rickery for 15 years, and this was the toughest static levels measurements that I've ever done. I was trying to find a snowmobile, but nobody had one in our country because they haven't been able to use one for about 5 years probably. So finally the snow melted and was able to get the statics done, and not too bad results compared to what we saw for rain last summer, but some of these wells, it takes up to 12 years to actually see what the levels are going to be. And snow melted off, and the winds came, so it's really, really dry, kind of like Nate said. We're wanting rain, but a lot of areas the wheat kind of is pretty patchy because a lot of it blew out, but then there's a lot of it looks really good. that's all I have to report. If anybody has any questions.
Commissioner Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Rod, how many wells do you guys do the static water level measurements on?
135.
Were you able to complete them all?
Yeah, finally. Luckily, we were able to get an extension, so we had to go an extra month. Because they're normally due, is it March, end of March, and we were just getting a good start by then, so.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we couldn't even use a four-wheeler to get into a lot of them. We had to walk, or I should have walked more.
Thank you, Rod.
Any other questions of Rod? Thank you, Rod. Plains Groundwater Management District, Jeff Menges.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Butler.
Okay, the report from the Plains. It's a repeat of what Nate and Rod said. We are dry. Unfortunately, there's a lot of wells running right now, either pre-watering or getting the corn in moisture that's been planted already. The Plains District has also filed a letter with the staff and State Engineer Kevin Ryan to withdraw our motion for a rule change, and we didn't quite get it in time for the packet, but that is in process. So that's all I have. If there's any questions, I'd attempt to answer.
Thank you, Commissioner Butler. Are there any questions for Commissioner? Thank you. Okay, moving on to East Cheyenne. Carolyn, are you with us today?
I am. Last two times I tried to be on Zoom, I couldn't get unmuted, so I thought I'd do it in person today. For East Cheyenne, we are proposing a newsletter, and it's almost done, just reminding people, our well users, to inspect their flow meters. Obviously, I've had 2 that have been called on that have been replaced, so kudos to those guys who are keeping track of their equipment. Also, our newsletter will have information about the fumigations, and we're trying to get the public involved in the conservation program for our district. And so I've been talking to individuals, encouraging them all to take part, because that affects each one of those well users, whether they're in the compact or in our little area. So our newsletter's really important for us to, and we no longer have a newspaper. So that's kind of hit us hard out there in the area that we're in. So we want to keep everybody kind of up to date. I've been also sending out the total flow meters that are required to be tested this year. I mean, that's a big thing, and now's the time to get that started. So we're informing our well users that this year is their year, their mark. And then also fumigation inspection. And we did finish our static tests on time. We didn't have quite the snow, but we were able to get out there and get it done. So we're trying to stay on track with everything that we're in need of trying to accomplish and start early this year, so we don't get behind later on. So, anybody, any questions? I'm glad to be here in person.
It's great to have you here. Any questions? Thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
Southern High Plains, Commissioner Hume.
Yeah, we've had some much welcome moisture over the past month or so, and up to 2.5 inches in places, and it certainly kind of changed everybody's outlook. We've got quite a bit more to get up the drought, but it's a start. We've got the Springfield stakeholder meeting coming up in old business, so I'll comment on that meeting at that point. And just note that Blake Gorley, the president of our Groundwater Management District, is here if he has anything to add.
I think I'll touch on anything later when we address the stakeholder meetings.
Okay, thank you for your report. Are there any questions of Commissioner Hume? Okay, Okay, moving on, North Kiowa Bijou, Commissioner Freehoff.
I hate to sound redundant, but it's dry by us too. And sprinklers are running, most crops are in, so we just need rain.
Thank you for the report. Are there any questions? Thank you, Commissioner Freehoff. Upper Black Squirrel Groundwater Management, Dave Doran. Dave, the floor is yours.
Morning, Commissioners. Dave Doran, Upper Black Squirrel. We've been real busy. It's been a little bit dry here of late. We had a good winter. Right now, we're in the process that we'll start flights on June the 1st. We will be doing an AEM 3D modeling of the alluvial aquifer all the way down to 1,200 feet deep. We'll do almost the entire alluvial aquifer of Upper Black Squirrel, which we're pretty excited about. Get a better understanding of the geology that underlies our basin, the water resources that are in not only the alluvium but the Denver Basin aquifers. We're in our second year of monitoring water levels in all the Denver Basin aquifers in a grid pattern throughout our entire basin. And we're into our second year, and starting USGS is doing that for us. That'll be a continuing study, and we're seeing water level declines in all the prospective Denver Basin aquifers, which was to be expected. We'll get a better idea here in the next couple months of what that looks like as far as what those declines look like. We're also doing water quality monitoring of the whole alluvial aquifer in the Upper Black Squirrel, and that's been ongoing. USGS is doing that for us as well. We're funding all that. We've also had a chance to do a lot of geophysical logging of wells in our basin, alluvial wells which have not been done, which was a preliminary step we took before we took on the AEM company called AGF Aqua Geo Frameworks out of Fort Laramie, Wyoming, is going to be doing that. And so Collier did some geophysical testing of wells with us. And then we just had a gravel pit or a sand operation that's going to open up in our basin. And that's the first time we've ever seen it, but they did coring rather than well logs. I mean, there's nothing bad about well logs. It's just that it's kind of up to the interpretation of the well driller and what he sees in the slurry. And so sometimes those are good points as monitoring, but because we're doing this, we've had this coring done on this gravel mine. It's in the three major tributaries. It's where they all three join. So it's kind of crucial to us to be able to see these cores come out where they went right down to the top of the alluvium. And I think it's given us a better sense of the geology is not what we thought it was underneath our basin. And that it's a lot more complicated than we've ever thought, or that the previous studies have told us what was under there. So that'll be interesting, and I think that'll help us to back up this AEM project because of the geology that's going into laying all that data out, and then when we fly over that area, we'll be able to confirm the AEM results. It goes back to the logging, which will be very helpful for us. So those are the things that are going on. We've got a lot of work going on in the basin, and of course a lot of growth. So any questions?
Sounds like you got a lot going on there. Commissioner Hume?
Yes, appreciate and understand a little bit more about the flights that you're doing and what the cost is and what you're hoping to accomplish with them.
It's roughly $400,000. The district is funding that solely. We felt that it was critical that we had a better grasp of how much water resources we have, and more importantly, where are the strategic places to do recharge in our basin. And so they'll fly 1,200 line miles, and it approximately takes, give or take, a week depending on weather and things like that, but we're pretty excited about it.
They are able to tell saturated thickness and what's the information they're gonna get?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I think that the company we're using does work all over the world. They've done work in California. They're leaving Florida, of all places you would think would be abundant with water, but they're finishing up in the Florida and Georgia, and they've done a lot of flying in the Mississippi Delta, the Yazoo Delta alluvium. So they'll leave there and then they'll arrive in, I think they're doing a little bit of work maybe in Kansas, and then they're coming to our location. So we're pretty excited.
Yeah, that does sound exciting. And they can get data down to 1,200 feet.
That's correct.
Wow, okay. Great, thank you.
Commissioner Butler.
I just want to say I applaud your district's efforts in trying to better understand your resource. Man, you're a storybook. You ought to. You're setting a road for the rest of us to attempt to follow. The fact that some of these dollars are self-funded, that speaks volumes to your constituents' commitment to the process. And I just want to say kudos.
Thank you.
Also, you made a comment that the Denver aquifers have declined.
Correct.
I'm out on the northeastern plains, eastern plains, I should say, in the northern High Plains Basin. Do the Denver aquifers recharge?
According to all the data we have, no, they don't.
Okay.
Not enough for the amount of withdrawals that are taken out. The inflows are much less than the outflows.
So it's a lot like our basin. Thank you very much.
One of the interesting things I'll tell you is that Bob Lombaugh, who did a lot of work kind of just for us, was, and GS was also back in the 80s, they knew that there was much more communication between the Denver Basin aquifers and the alluvial aquifers. And so that's what we also like to be able to lock down with this AEM project, is it will show communication between aquifers. And I'm not saying all of them do, but in some places I think those Denver Basin aquifers do communicate a great deal. And I think what we're trying to figure out is to what extent and where those occur.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
Can you help our commission understand the funding mechanism that you have within your district? Is it, is it a mill levy?
It is mill levy.
Is that the only
Yeah,
funding?
we've tried to stay out of litigation as much as possible and start banking as much money as we can. And we're looking to collect the data so that it helps all of us, our county, you guys, ourselves, get a better understanding. Maybe we can work out and resolve this without litigating, and so we have banked a lot of that money.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much for your
Mr. Chair, oh, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
And I'm behind you, so I just wasn't sure if you could see me.
Go ahead.
Great. I just wanted to flag something. It's really exciting to hear about that work, and you're just using, real innovative and emerging technologies to understand the water resources. I would flag for you that the state does have quite a bit of grant money right now through water plan grants, through water supply reserve fund grants that go through the Basin Roundtable. So I don't know for sure if it's the right fit or not for this work, but I would encourage your district and other districts to look into some of those state funds to see if it's the right fit, so we can deploy that technology for other aquifers.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you very much for that comment. Anything else for Dave? Thank you. Okay. Upper Big Sandy Groundwater Management District. Tracy Durgan.
Before I start Upper Big Sandy, you can see on our Upper Black Squirrel website, there is 2 videos, one from Aqua Geo Frameworks and one from PBS, the helicopter that's flying. The apparatus had one done on PBS, and those are available on our website to view. So upperblacksquirrelcreekwater.com. You can read about it and see what it looks like and watch the videos, and it's kind of helpful and explains the process. As far as Upper Big Sandy goes, I don't have a lot to report. They are still working on their metering project. They're hoping to get that done and have all large capacity wells metered in the district. And they're also in the beginning stages of wanting to do a water study and something more current and up to date. But other than that, I don't have a lot to report on them. They're just hoping for moisture like everybody else. That's about it.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions for Tracy? Thank you. Lost Creek, Tom Sauter. Tom, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Good morning. It's nice to see all of you here today. The only thing that's really new, what's going on in Lost Creek, the board purchased 4 Davis weather stations, and those are now online. So you can download the mobile app from Davis Weather Instruments, and then you can see exactly what's happening throughout the district. We did this effort to do these weather stations was a collaborative effort with the East Adams Soil Conservation District. They don't have their weather stations up. They're putting in 3 new ones, and they're upgrading 2. These are all will either be Wi-Fi or cell phone. So it's kind of exciting to see what's going on, see how dry it actually is. And we continue to monitor the aquifer, the alluvial, and we have some monitors in some of the Laramie Fox Hills wells too. But Lost Creek is really watching a lot what's going on down south of us on this AEM, so we're kind of excited about that. It's really exciting to find out that there may be some roundtable money to do this too. So, but anyhow, Jed, welcome back. It's nice to see you here again. So, any questions for us?
I actually have a question.
Sure.
We had a conversation here earlier today. Can you talk a little bit about what the district is doing in terms of putting together a software management system for tracking the different uses of wells, and how Todd in particular is trying to use that as a framework for better record keeping?
I really can't comment on that. We're going to have a meeting with the staff at the end of the month. Todd is with Kevin, and I think Joanna is going to be there too, so we'll have more information there. Todd's working on that, and I don't know if it's so much well use as data, what's going on, aquifer levels, not so much well use.
So just the monitoring of the. Are there any other questions for Tom?
Okay, thank you.
Report. Upper Crows Creek. I don't see Dan Lloyd here. Commissioner Tietmeyer, do you have no report? Okay. Republican River Water Conservation District, Deb Daniel.
Good morning, everyone. This is Peyton, and I will actually be reporting for Deb. I wanted to let you all know that since the last update, Deb is feeling much better, and she's very happy to be back in the office. We've been very busy lately, and we have many irons in the fire. A quick recap. The district has met the first goal set out by the state, meaning we have signed over 10,000 irrigated acres up for conservation programs. we have encumbered approximately 60% of the ARPA dollars awarded with Senate Bill 2228. We are already working toward our next deadline of 15,000 additional acres by December 31st, 2029. When the district visited Washington, D.C. in March, we spoke to many legislative staff members and staff of the federal agricultural agencies about what would benefit producers moving forward and how we would like to see those issues resolved in the upcoming Farm Bill. We spoke to USDA Undersecretary Bonnie about the potential of a dryland farmable credit program. Undersecretary Bonnie quickly spoke to the federal FSA, NRCS, and USDA folks, and the state of Colorado and USDA will sign the agreement for that pilot program next week. Mike Sullivan's assistant was instrumental in getting the pilot program of dryland farmable credit. I would like to thank him very much for his exceptional work at the state for the past many, many years. The district has an additional bill, House Bill 23-1220, currently making its way through the Colorado House of Representatives. If passed, the bill will fund an economic study on the basin-wide impact of the curtailment of all large capacity wells. The bill has local legislative support, and I hope Deb can give you a positive update on the bill during the next meeting. The district board will discuss working with the Division of Water Resources and the Yuma County Water Authority to address the flooding issues along the North Fork of the Republican during the winter months. And I hope that Deb can be with you all during the August commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Hey, I want the video back. Didn't you do a great job?
Thank you so much for letting Pete give the report today.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving the report. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to old business. Report on the stakeholder meeting held in Springfield in March. As Tracy's coming to the microphone, tell us, when you held this meeting in March, was there a snowstorm?
We did not have a snowstorm in March. We were finally able to have this public meeting after, this is our third try. We had to cancel in January and cancel again in February. So although I think, the local community in the Southern High Plains was pleased that we were able to bring them snow a couple of times during the winter, so there was a positive there. So we held the meeting on the evening of March 13th. I thought we had a really good turnout. We had approximately 120 people present from the local community, some local elected officials as well. You all should have seen the staff memo in your meeting materials. So there's a 2-page staff memo there for you summarizing the meeting, the agenda, and a lot of the discussion that we had. And then attached to that memo are, I think, 73 surveys that were collected that evening, and we went ahead and scanned those in and redacted names and email addresses for people's privacy, but wanted to make just those available to all of you commissioners in their entirety, so you could peruse them and gain a feeling for what the local community thinks about the proposal to do a rule change. The rule change we were talking about that evening that was before us was a request for closing the basin completely to new appropriations. So that was, the concept that we were discussing there at the meeting. So that's the, summary I wanted to provide you all, but certainly available if there's any questions.
Thank you for the report. What questions do the commissioners have? Commissioner Noble.
Thank you. Thanks for holding that meeting. I just had a question about whether or not actual proposed rule language was considered at all during that meeting, or was it more high level in terms of the discussion?
Yeah, I would say it was pretty high level in terms of the discussion, but by March we did have the original proposed petition to close the basin in front of us, which staff understood was to have a full closure. The petition group also got to present what they were trying to do, what the proposal was to do to the community there. So they had some time there on the agenda where they also talked about closing the basin, at least as one possible rule change.
Commissioner Keeler.
I did look at the surveys. Curious who framed the questions and put the survey out. Was it staff or?
Yeah, so staff put together the surveys. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Freeland.
do you think the stakeholder meeting was fruitful?
I think that's a really challenging question to answer. I would say that it was fruitful and that I felt like it gave the community a good opportunity to, again, discuss a really difficult problem facing the community. You know, staff for that meeting made a really big point in not taking a lot of the time on the agenda because over a year beforehand, you all are aware, Keith Vanderhorst made a pretty extensive presentation to the community about the physical and legal situation in the basin. We didn't feel that it was really worth the community's time to talk about that. So I think this gave the community a lot more time to express their thoughts than the last time we had a community meeting in the Southern High Plains. And so, you know, I think that dialogue is valuable, but I would not say that there was, you know, a clear consensus from the community necessarily coming out of that discussion, and you know, certainly acknowledging it's a difficult situation facing that community in terms of their water resources. So any
other questions? Commissioner Hume.
Yeah, just more of a comment. I'd just like to extend my appreciation to the staff that came down to the meeting, and they, for those of you who weren't able to be there, they did a fantastic job of answering questions and providing much needed information. Did an outstanding job of that. And, I would also note that I did just some quick numbers on the surveys that we had, and came up with about 60 of the surveys were opposing the petition to open to close the basin and open rulemaking. 10 that were for the petition and 3 that were unclear from the information there. So those numbers are 82% to 14% to 4%. So.
Okay, any more questions for Ms. Coughlin? Commissioner Ogle.
Sorry, just one additional follow-up question. The petition that we have before us today, I think, includes alternatives in addition to closing the basin, such as limiting the amount of water applied per acre and a formula for determining what the allowed withdrawal is. And it sounds to me like the discussion really revolved around just closing the basin and not some of these other alternatives that have been included in the petition. Is that accurate?
I would say yes and no. You know, in the memo, there's some bullets about some of the questions that came up during the meeting, during the public meeting, and people did have a lot of curiosity around the different types of rule changes that could happen as alternatives to a full closure. So that the community was interested in understanding what types of alternatives there were, but there wasn't any type of real presentation of like, these are 5 different alternatives that you as a community could consider, but it came up in the questions and discussion. So nothing was really before them.
Other questions? State Engineer Ryan or Kelly, either one of you have a question for Ms. Coughlin?
Chair, I just appreciate the deputy director keeping me informed on this, so I feel pretty up to speed on it, and I don't have any questions for her.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I echo what Kevin said. Tracy's kept me and executive director up to speed.
Thank you very much for your report. We have no further questions. Okay, moving on to agenda item 11B. Now, this was the agenda that we approved with the addition to the agenda earlier in the week. Commission to consider whether to proceed with rulemaking based on the petition to close the Southern High Plains Basin to all new high-capacity water well appropriations unless approved under a commission-approved replacement plan, or limit new appropriations based on the allowable rate of depletion, and amend Rule 5.5 to limit irrigation appropriations to 2.5 acre-feet per acre in the Southern High Plains Basin.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner.
Yeah, I just would let the commission know I plan to recuse myself from the decision on this item, and we'll set to the side of the room while you determine your actions on it.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Kosloff.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I thought it might be helpful to the commission because there are a number of documents in the meeting materials related to this agenda item. I thought it might be helpful if I walk through the timeline and what those materials are, if that's helpful.
That would be perfect.
All right, thank you. So just stepping through the meeting materials that you all have before you for this agenda item, I think as you're all aware, we originally received a petition for this rule change in the fall. And staff's understanding at that time was that the petition was to request a rule change to completely close the Southern High Plains Basin to new appropriations. And then just recently, I received via email what is in your materials as proposed SHP, Southern High Plains rule change. This is a document signed by Tilden Smith on April 24th. On April 28th, I received another email from the petition group with what is marked as proposed SHP rule change amendment 1. And the petition group requested that that replace what you have as proposed SHP rule change, which they stated was sent in error. So the intention of the petition group is that what you see as Amendment 1 replace what you see as proposed SHP rule change. And then on May 2nd, I received another email from the petition group with proposed SHP rule change Amendment 2 from your packet. This document includes specific language for a rule change, including what we refer to as a circle test, at least for the way new appropriations are considered in the Northern High Plains. We call this the circle test. And this also includes requested rule change to Rule 5.5, limiting appropriations in the Southern High Plains to 2.5 acre-feet per acre, compared to the current rule for the Southern High Plains, which is 3.5 acre-feet per acre. So those are the petition and the amendments that you have in your packet. And then on May 4th, Alan Curtis emailed Kevin Ryan with a letter on behalf of the Southern High Plains Groundwater Management District opposing the petition. Also on May 4th, Brian Kelly, this is another document that you have. On May 4th, Brian Kelly, president of the Baca County Farm Bureau, emailed Rick Nielsen with a letter signed by himself and another gentleman who was the Prowers County Farm Bureau president in opposition to the proposed rulemaking. So that's the summary of the documents that you have in your meeting materials related to this item.
Okay. Commissioners, do you all have those documents? And you all understand the process? Any questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, who's here on behalf of the petitioner?
Jack Dawson.
Okay. Mr. Dawson, if you would have a seat there and state your name so we can hear it on the microphone, please.
John K. Dawson is actually my name. They call me Jack, though. First of all, I'd like to make sure I understand what the purpose of today's meeting is. Are we going to decide whether to take up, consider the rule change? Is that what it is?
Yes, to consider if we're going to move forward with the rulemaking based upon the petition in front of us.
Right. Right. Well, when I first started this, I was hearing about all the wells going dry, the stock wells and domestic wells going dry, and I thought, man, this is bad. This is getting bad. And you know, since 1967, if you're to believe the 1967 Beck report and then 2002 McLaughlin report, and then extrapolate into 2023, according to my figures, we've used 83% of the water, the recoverable water, since 1967. So I think that kind of warrants some sort of action. We do have a little bit of a kind of a split on the in the petition group. I'm in favor of the 3 mile rule, and which is using the appropriate constants. And I think my technical basis is this was a recommendation made by the McLaughlin water engineers in 2002. They give several constants that would be appropriate for that basin. And there's some deep water too, but they call it, they go 200 feet down into the Dockham and report on how much water there is up above that. And then they report on the possibility of how much water there is below that. So what my proposal is that we use the 3 mile equation with the appropriate constants and use the 200 feet into the Dockham as the bottom level to figure the water in storage. You know, and the B part of that equation, which would be the depletion factor, would be 0.5, and it's in the recommendations of the McLaughlin report. So now, I think Tilden would like to address why he thinks that it should be a complete ban on new appropriations.
Before we get to that, are there any questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Noble.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. The figures you cited, what you referred to using this 3 mile rule, and then you had various referred to appropriate constants. Do you have any information about what those would be?
Yes.
Has there been any analysis done as to what those figures should be?
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. It was a recommendation given by the McLaughlin report in 2002. And since then, there's been 21 years passed at something approximating 200,000 acre feet depletion every year of those 21. So that's how I figured it. You know, the math is correct. We don't know how close the reports are, you know, to being accurate. I think that's probably all we have to go on, you know. I will admit that when I first started this process about 1.5 years ago, my feeling was, boy, we're in trouble right away, you know. But now, there are places that I believe deserve to be allowed to drill new wells, new appropriations. There are other places that it'd kind of be futile, you know. I think it would be not good for the population of Baker County to allow further appropriations in certain places, if I make that clear.
Yeah, thanks. And then one unrelated question. Can you explain to us, do you have water uses in the Southern High Plains Basin? Do you own wells or?
Well, I own 4 wells that have gone dry. So, you know, and the solution to that, the remedy for that is drilling deeper, and I'm sure that in my area, I could drill deeper. When the decision came, when I had to make a decision, I turned to CRP. You know, CRP is a pretty good way to farm. And so that meant that I didn't have to decide whether or not to drill deeper.
Thank you.
Commissioner Keeler.
Sir, you said you had 4 wells go dry. Were they irrigation wells or stock wells or?
No, they were high capacity wells. Sorry, I didn't make that clear.
Yeah, you said you could go deeper. Were they to shale or not to shale?
And they weren't into the, I don't know that they were deep enough to get to the shale. And I don't know for certain that there is a solid shale there. In certain parts, there is aquitard, I think they call it. In certain parts of the basin, there's plenty of, there's places that separate the Dockham from the Cheyenne. And to tell you the truth, I don't know whether or not where I am has that good shale barrier or not. At any rate, I think that with all the wells that have been drilled around there, it's probably leaky at best. You know, it's been recommended, and in 2009, the Southern High Plains was administratively at least declared to be one aquifer. You know, originally there was 4 or 5 aquifer, you know, and I think that was destined to be, you know, because there's not a good shale barrier over that much of the basin. My idea from reading the report is probably what a third of the basin or something like that has a good shale barrier between the Cheyenne and the Dockham.
How deep were your wells?
You know, at first I thought they were 230 feet, but I think that I'm not positive. I remember my dad told him when he first drilled them, he told me that our best well, that if that ever went dry, that you could drill deeper and get water. So I think it's about around 400 feet that you would hit the bottom of the Cheyenne. And I know I'm not very close to that. So like I say, it could be remedied by drilling.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Mr. Dawson? Commissioner Friel.
You stated that you believe some places could have wells, that there's enough water, and other places don't. Do you have any way of identifying these locations?
Well, as I understand that there's probably, I guess I'm assuming that there's enough data from well drilling logs that you could establish a floor, and of course you have a fairly extensive water level program that determines the top. And the recommendation of the McLaughlin group shows what they use a 0.15, what is it?
Specific yield.
Specific yield, thank you. And so, I don't know that there would be enough data over the whole basin, but I'm guessing that there would be enough data for 75–80% of the basin to be fairly accurately mapped as far as water volume, saturated thickness.
Commissioner Fowler.
Yeah, thanks for your time. And,
Thank you.
Yes. So my background is technical, so I apologize for the question, but as a representative of this area, how do you feel about, it's been quite a bit of time that's passed since the McLaughlin report was published. And
Right.
it appears that, I mean, I totally respect that you're on the ground, eyes, living in this basin and understanding water availability is, you know, really important, and data, you know, water levels don't always really tell the true story. But how does your group feel, or how do you feel in trying to get some more information to inform this dissection of different areas of your basin being allowed to have, you know, new water, you know, appropriations made versus another? I just find that personally for me, I would want to see some information to be able to be comfortable in knowing that there's a basis for that.
Right, and I think it would be good to have another study done. You know, I don't like the idea of putting it off for, you know, putting the decision off very long, but there probably are areas in the basin that need more understanding, probably need more water, monitor wells, you know, probably need an update, you know, as far as, I'm sure there's, in the 21 years since the McLaughlin report, I'm sure that there's been some method developed that better map. Now, I don't know much about that, but I would guess that there has been better ways to study.
And Jill, one final question. You heard earlier about the availability of some funds, and you're just a representative of the groundwater management district. I understand that, but
No,
you're
the petition group.
Your petition, okay. So I just didn't know if there was some thought put into considering how to supplement the existing reports and data, you know, new information. It's just a thought I have, but 21 years is a long time, so.
Right. I really think it's hard to say how much water is depleted every year. You know, I mean, in the best case it is. I know the feller I've worked for has a bunch of sprinklers, and every one of them's nozzled at 200 gallons, which means there's not much water there. But I know there's a lot of areas, and Tim is using some, has at least one well that is pumping good water from below the 200 feet into the dock, you know. But generally speaking, I think that it's not economically viable for most people to be able to drill that deep and be able to, you know, I think it's economically hard for some people to get that deep and try to pump too much water. And I think in the future, there'll probably be a lot of water pumped out of the dock, but we don't know how much is there yet. There's very few wells go into it. past 200 feet is the dock. Generally, that would be about 500 feet, or even a little bit more.
Appreciate your.
Any other questions? Chairman? Yes, Commissioner Popper.
Thank you. Refresh my memory. You guys have a unique situation down there as far as aquifers.
Right.
Okay. I deal with one. So what aquifers are we actually referring to as they stack from top to bottom?
Well, it depends on where you are in the basin, but generally speaking, the most of it starts out with the Ogallala, which even 21 years ago, they said that the Ogallala, the McLaughlin report said that the Ogallala was a fairly insignificant provider of irrigation water. Now, there may be some, and I think there is some places in the basin that is artesian fed into the aquifer. But I think that generally speaking, the aquifer doesn't, the Ogallala Aquifer member of the system, geohydraulic system, or hydrological system. Below the Ogallala, you've got the Dakota, and then below or it's actually part of the Dakota, but it's most generally referred to as a separate aquifer member is the Cheyenne, and then below that is the Document. And generally speaking, they're pretty much except for in the southeast part of the Southern High Plains, where you've only got the Ogallala and the Document, it pinches out. And I think that, you know, I studied and I tried to figure out why they didn't put some criteria for depletion in the Southern High Plains like they did the Northern High Plains. You know, since 1967, they used the 3-mile equation. And what I've seen referred to in print several times is that it's a complicated geology, and it's also the fact that there was as many as 5 levels of aquifers. You know, the alluvium that you know, I guess you have the alluvium about anywhere you are, but yeah, I would say that it's complicated, but I am confident that most areas could be mapped fairly accurately with well data. You know, and I'm not an expert on this, but I think that 70 years of data will probably provide a lot of secrets to how much water, whether you're in an area that will support a new appropriation, or you're in the area where it's going to run dry in 10 or 15 years, you know.
All right, thank you.
Additional questions? I have a couple of questions. Were you in the March 13th stakeholder meeting?
Yes.
Tell us in your words how your concerns and your issues were addressed.
You mean the way we addressed it, or?
Just in the conversation. A stakeholder process means that everybody that has something at stake comes together and has a conversation. With your issues and your concerns, how were they addressed?
Well, like I said, there's a little bit of division within the petition group as how it ought to be addressed. You know, whether or not a full ban on new appropriations is appropriate or not. I don't think so. But it probably depends on whether you're trying to get regeneration. If you're trying to get regeneration, good luck. Because you'd have to close the basin to get regeneration. You know, I think it's dry down there. I think, but as far as, it was a mostly civil situation, and I think that I think we were able to impart our concerns well. I think everybody understood them. Mostly the people that were there were irrigators, you know, and which is fine. I mean, I love irrigation. Irrigation is great. So I have nothing against new appropriations if the location will sustain it.
Do you feel that your issues and concerns were fairly discussed? Did you have any takeaways from that conversation from those who want the basin to remain open?
Well, I think for the most part, it was a fair treatment of us, you know, real civil for the most part. Now, there was a little bit of contention, but nothing the feller can't handle.
Oh, I appreciate that comment too. You talked about division within the petitioners. Did you reach any kind of consensus, or did either side kind of move in this discussion? How did you leave it?
Well, there's still dissension. Tilden, and he may be right, you know, I don't know. Again, I think it depends on what your goal is. If you're going to try to get regeneration, you're about to have to shut off the wells that are existing, you know. And I don't want to do that by any means. And I think there's probably going to be a few of the high capacity wells start going dry more than now, more than what occurs right now. So it's a kind of a self-limiting thing. It's going to have to snow a lot to get much regeneration down there. And like I said, if my calculations are right, it's 83% gone, you know, from what it was in 1967. I wanted to address the going from 3.5 feet to 2.5 feet also. I really don't think that affects very many people. The 3.5 rule was put in way back, and that was maybe needed back then because they didn't have sprinklers. I mean there were sprinklers, but 80 or 85% of the people didn't have sprinklers. They just irrigated down the road. It's a pretty wasteful way to irrigate nowadays. So I really don't think, you know, the 2.5 feet is not going to be earth-shattering. It's not going to make a whole lot of difference.
So I have one last question. Can you describe what the consequences would be of closing the basin?
Well, I think, and that's another reason why I don't want to close the basin. I just want a partial closure, I guess is the best way to describe it. I think it would reduce the economic benefit to the rest of the basin, the population of the basin. You know, we're losing, and I suppose all of rural Colorado is experiencing this. We're losing population anyway, you know. So I think that if you close down all the basins or all the new appropriations, I think that it would result in less people there. It doesn't, with big old tractors, it doesn't take many people to farm dry land.
That's very true.
office, and I want to follow up on a question that Chairman Arnish asked. At least I believe this is a follow-up to your question. The commission received some actual red lines to the rules. Are these yours? Were these submitted?
Yes,
Were these discussed at the stakeholder meeting in March?
No.
Okay. Was the proposed revision to Rule 5.5 discussed at the stakeholder meeting in March?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Dawson? Commissioner Noble.
Not so much a question, just a comment. I just really appreciate your testimony. I think it really helps shed light on the complicated nature of the situation down there. We haven't gotten testimony like that in the past, so I appreciate that. Just thank you.
Well, you're welcome.
Any other questions?
Well, I appreciate y'all considering this.
Okay, thank you. Sir, go ahead and have your name for the record.
My name is Philip Smith, and I was at the commission meeting, and it's good to see everybody here and everything. I'm the dissenter. Didn't want to really close it to shut the wells down, just wanted to close it to new ones. With an exception of municipal high capacity wells. I mean, that's different. That's not farming. The water is going away. It's really not an issue. The issue is how soon, how quickly it's going to go away. But it is going away. And Backett County, where all this High Plains Basin is located, is probably the only county in Colorado that gets none of their water from any of those wonderful sources of that Colorado River water. We get nothing from Colorado. Everything is underground, and it is going away. Stopping new high-capacity irrigation wells might keep it from going away sooner. But he thinks there might be more water down south around the docking. It could be, I don't know. But it's still going away, and how fast will that be, and how slow will that be? And what the issue is now doing, what you do now will maybe affect future generations. I mean, I know I've got 2 wells, and I'm sure I'm going to have them until I die. I'm not going to be around much longer. Maybe even the generation after me will have enough water. And what are we going to do? Just let the little unborn bookers fend for themselves? Because it is going away. It really is. So that's all I have to say.
Any questions for Mr. Smith? Any questions? Any questions from the commissioners online? Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your taking your time to be here today.
Well, thank you.
Is there anybody else here on behalf of the petitioners that wishes to speak? Is there anyone here opposed to the petition that would like to speak?
That would be me, Chairman. My name's Alan Curtis. I'm here on behalf of the Southern High Plains Groundwater Management District.
Mr. Curtis, you have the floor.
I think what we've seen this morning is that there's really not a fixed proposal by petition in front of the commission this morning. We've got 2 people that appeared, one of which prefers to close the basin, the other one says he's not going to close the basin, can drill a well deeper, talked about an aquitard between the large capacity well formations and where his well is, admitted to questions Mr. Dawson did that there's not adequate data for closure of the whole basin, as I understood was being requested. There was some discussion about applying northern high plains determinations to different, more complex geological aquifer conditions. Those are kind of the high level things, but in terms of the procedural issues in front of the commission, you need to have a clear description of the parties requesting the rulemaking. And I think the discussion you heard this morning and the 3 sets of documents, some of which are signed by some parties and not others, some of the specific rule changes were proposed by Mr. Dawson and not others. You need to be able to identify the persons or entities that are requesting the petition, and I don't think they can do that. The new rule 5.2.3.3 from Mr. Dawson's amendment again appears to be patterned after the Northern High Plains Basin Rule 5.2.2.2. Uses a 50% depletion that shows up in a single table in that 2002 McLaughlin report, but there's no interstitial connection between that number and what they're proposing based on scientific or technical information they provided in support of the rule. Existing Rule 5.2.3.4, which allows additional new appropriations from existing wells, is just deleted in its entirety from the proposal with no explanation, no scientific or technical basis for doing that. The new rule, again, 5.2.3.4, this is in the second amendment you have, uses the Northern High Plains Basin Rule 5.2.2.3, again with no explanation of the technical or scientific basis provided, saying that that's appropriate. New Rule 5.2.3.3 from Amendment 2 references that McLaughlin report. It's a 2002 report. It's a general reference. The report itself is 96 pages. The report is over 21 years old, and I would just like to direct the commission to a couple of sections of that report that may be relevant to your consideration. And I'm going to give you PDF pages because there's some kind of weird Roman numeral numbering on those pages. Section 9.1, which is on PDF page 44 of the McLaughlin report, concludes, and I'm quoting here, the Cheyenne Formation, which Mr. Dawson discussed, and the Dockham Group are the last remaining sources of water with water quality and quantity characteristics to support the current investment in irrigated agriculture and its associated supported industries in the area. That's a conclusion from that same report. Section 1 on page 46 of the McLaughlin report states, and I quote, since the High Plains and Dakota aquifer units, which I think we discussed in connection with Mr. Dawson's wells, are currently the source for most of the domestic and stock water wells. And again, I'm quoting from the PDF page 46 of the McLaughlin report, reducing well pumping from high capacity wells in those formations, quote, would not, however, prevent the continued depletion of the current water supplies contained in those 2 aquifer units, which is referring back to the wells that Mr. Dawson is seeking to protect. And in short, the McLaughlin report actually confirms that limiting future high-capacity irrigation well appropriations would significantly damage the current investment in irrigated agriculture and its associated support industries, but would not prevent the depletions to the petitioner's domestic livestock and senior irrigation wells that they're trying to address. Based on the McLaughlin report, the Commission should deny the petition on that basis alone. That's consistent with the current Commission Rules 5.2.3.3 and 5.2.3.4, which currently allow the Commission to approve new large capacity well permits and increase appropriations for existing wells without the need for a replacement plan. And that's because the information currently in front of the Commission is that the basin is not over appropriated, and I'd cite you to Commission Rule 5.2.3, which has no such finding. In addition to those kind of fundamental issues, the petition does not include the required statement of basis and purpose. There is a paragraph that says that, but what needs to be included in the statement of basis and purpose is a detailed analytical statement of the scientific or technological rationale justifying the proposed rule. Again, that's from the Commission's own procedure rule 6D4. That scientific rationale isn't provided, and I think Mr. Dawson explained to the Commission members that there's a lot of work that needs to be done out there. The basin isn't fully understood, and they haven't done that work that would justify a partial and certainly not a complete closure of the basin to new appropriations. Absent the ability to look at all that information for my clients and other clients, if that information is there under the Charnes v. Robinson case, which is cited in the letter I provided the Commission yesterday, any rule subsequently adopted by the Commission would be void. Because the Commission, the petition does not meet the requirements of Procedure Rule 6D4, it shouldn't be considered by the Commission. There's also an issue with Rule 6D1 of the Commission's procedural rules, which would require the petition to identify the nature of the request, and based on the absence of the scientific or technological rationale justifying the proposed rule changes, that can't occur. Before you, as a Commission, can notice rulemaking, the Commission must be able to identify either the terms or substance of the proposed rule or a description of the subjects and issues involved. Based on the issues we previously discussed, this can occur, and I don't believe the petition should be considered by the Commission at this point. There's also an issue under Procedure Rule 3, which requires a discussion of the Commission's authority to promulgate the rule. That is provided. However, what's being proposed here is allowing the Commission to conduct rulemaking based on a petition that does not comply with the Commission's own procedural rules or Colorado statutes. And there's no authority for that, and that's an additional reason that the Commission should not consider the petition. 6B of your procedural rules requires the information, including the petition and supporting information, to be open to public inspection. That's also a requirement under the statute, which I've cited in my letter. Because the petition does not include the required statement of basis and purpose, the scientific or technological rationale justifying the proposed changes, or the statement of Commission authority that says they can do this in violation of Colorado statutes and their own procedural rules, the petition does not and cannot meet public inspection requirements as a matter of law. For all of those reasons, I would urge you on behalf of the Southern High Plains Groundwater Management District not to consider the petition at this point based on those deficiencies. I can answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. Are there any questions from the Commission? Questions? Questions from the Commissioners online? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed. Is there anyone else that's here in opposition to the consideration of the petition? As you take a seat, go ahead and state your name for the record, please.
I'm Blake Morley. I'm the president of the Southern High Plains Groundwater Management District. I have very little to add to what Alan said. That's a pretty comprehensive assessment of where we're at and where our position is as a district. And I just wanted to point out that that as a district management, my whole group of officers unanimously opposed the petition to close the basin. And I wanted to stress that it's not You know, this is a widely held opinion or feelings in our basin that it's important and crucial for our basin to stay open and explorable for the economic benefits of our community. So, just to give a little bit of my take of the meeting, the stakeholders meeting, I hope you all have had the chance to watch it online. I personally thought it was really productive. I thought that a lot of information was put out there that was useful to the public, and so with that, you know, I think that people got interested. You know, people in the community got interested, and I received a lot of feedback and a lot of calls after the meeting, all of which, every one of which was opposing the petition to close the basin. So with that, I'll kind of go ahead and go through some of the notes. I just took notes as we went along here. I would like to point out that the petition in its current form, which I'm not really sure which petition it is, seems like maybe there's multiple, but carries 3 signatures. The original had, I don't know how many signatures. I went through it. I'd say minimum 75% were well outside the basin. The current one carries 3 signatures, and you'd think that if there was a large cry to close the basin, that more than, 14 people supporting the petition would have shown up at the stakeholder meeting, which some of those 14 I'm relatively sure live outside the basin, probably even closer to the Arkansas River watershed than they do the edge of the Southern High Plains basin. So I'd like to point out a couple other things that, you know, it's in the McLaughlin study. It's the most recent, best information we have. The Dockham is largely unexplored. The McLaughlin study shows an estimated 19,266,500 acre feet of saturated or water, you know, in the Dockham, or saturated thickness in the Dockham, which is, you know, by far the largest water carrying formation that we have underneath us. I agree that it's economically restrictive for a lot of people to drill into the Dockham aquifer, which is why I think it's very important that we leave it open, because that's irrigation and, you know, concentrated feeding operations. Those are the operations that can economically support those kind of investments. Without that, we're stuck pulling all of our water out of the formations that, you know, that residential domestic stock wells can afford to drill into. The McLaughlin study, as Alan pointed out, also shows that the Ogallala, Cheyenne, Dakota aquifers are adequate, or Ogallala, Dakota, I guess, are adequate and should remain adequate sources of water for livestock and residential domestic uses. We have a little bit of data that we pulled from the 8, and this is in the video if you haven't seen it. The 8 wells closest to Mr. McKinley's house, which is, you know, where this was all supposed to have started. The data from all 8 of those wells show a steady, stable water level or a rising water level in the wells closest to it. So I feel like a lot of the information that's been put out there is not accurate, and that's our goal as a district, is to put the most accurate information out in front of our people, and that's what we strive to do in the stakeholder meeting back in March. just to touch on one other question, I believe, maybe Tim, you asked the question about the formations and the complexity of the formations down there. And this, some of you in the Northern High Plains may be familiar with Shaw Drilling out of Burlington. Warren Shaw, great guy. Unless you don't like him, then no, he's great. I like Warren a lot. I've bounced a lot of ideas off of him. He told me one time when I asked him about drilling a well, he said, in the Southern High Plains, it's nothing like it is in the Northern High Plains. He said around Burlington, where he's at, he can punch a hole anywhere and get a well. In the Southern High Plains, it's not that way. You know, we have hard rock formations in places. We have, you know, our levels, our water levels vary tremendously from location to location, even within 100 yards. You know, so the complexity of the Southern High Plains, I think, is probably more than a lot of people understand. We rely a lot on test holes to determine where the water-bearing formations are. You know, the shale layers, you know, as you referred to before, a lot of times that doesn't mean a lot to us. You know, you might drill through the Ogallala, which, you know, is carrying a little water, and you're getting in a good sand formation, and it seems like there's a lot of water there. Well, there is good windmill water, stock water, domestic water, but it's through those shale layers is where we get into the volumes of water that we can irrigate on, and those volumes of water we believe don't impact, you know, the withdrawals from those areas don't impact the water in the Ogallala Dakota aquifers, which is, you know, referenced in the McLaughlin study. So really, I don't have much. Alan was very comprehensive. He put in there about everything that I'd like to share, but most of that came up in case someone has any questions for me.
Any questions for, yes, go ahead, Commissioner Palmer.
I turned it on this time myself. I apologize. What was your first name?
My name is Blake.
Blake. Okay. Blake, your reference to Mr. Shaw is accurate. The man knows what he's doing. Right. The part of that comment that wasn't quite right was in the last less than a month I've seen where in my part of the basin, I'm 18 miles west of Burlington. The Burlington area, yeah, you can maybe punch a hole anywhere and get a livestock, domestic, whatever you want.
Sure.
In my area, no. We're on that edge where, and I hear that that's kind of what's happening in your area too. And I realize and I can really appreciate your groundwater management district stepping up and trying to take the lead on this, but one question I've got is how many irrigators make up your groundwater management district board of supervisors? Do you have anybody that doesn't irrigate? Let me ask it that way.
I have to think on that. Currently I'm not irrigating. I'm a cattle feeder. So there's me. I'm trying to think. Tim, you might have a better idea. I don't know if Dale Camp's an irrigator right now. Honestly, I'm going to say probably pretty much everyone is an irrigator. Yeah, they're the people in the community that have the most to lose by doing this. They're the people in the community that are producing all of or the vast majority of the economic influx in the community. So yeah, I would say we're primarily irrigators on the management district. But
I guess my concern is that even you as a cattle feeder have a very vested interest in the water, and I get that because even in my area, the basin in the Northern High Plains, where we've got a extremely large cattle feeding operation, and my question for those guys is just, where is this thing going to go? Because they are definitely in a spot in the aquifer that is not good. And my question and my concern for the Southern High Plains is the same. We have too many straws in our aquifer in the entire basin. Nothing we can do about it. Here you guys have an opportunity to maybe, because our basin's already closed. The damage is done. And I guess I would just hope that the stakeholder process doesn't stop. It continues. I'm anxious to hear, Mr. Chairman, from the staff side of these stakeholder meetings, a little bit more in depth, perhaps. But keep this dialogue going, because don't end up like we are. And you still have the ability to change that outcome. We don't.
Sure, and I would respond to that with, I think we are changing that. You used the reference of straws in the drink, and that's where we're at. Economics are determining, and economics are going to determine when it's time to close the basin. And it won't be anything that you all have to consider. When it's economically not feasible to drill a new irrigation well because the water's too deep or it's too expensive to pump or whatever, we won't drill them. The study shows that we're still going to have water for domestic and stock use based on the recharges coming into the Ogallala, Dakota aquifers. So what I think we're doing is the economics support drilling into the Dockham aquifer. And if you put your straws all at the same level, you're going to suck it down to that level. I mean, that's the nature of a drink, right? So when the bottom of your glass is a lot bigger than the top, why don't you punch a straw down into the lower levels of your glass? I guess that's where I'm going. I think that it shows in the McLaughlin study that a lot of the recharge in the Dockham aquifers comes from the Cheyenne, the Ogallala, the Cheyenne, the Dakota. They drain down into it to a certain degree, and we don't have a lot of data on the recharge of the Dockham because we've pulled very little out of it. So it's a huge resource for us right there. If we close that off, then we're basically storing it, and what are we storing it for? If we can't access it, then we're storing it. It's a resource that we have beneath us. We can't use it. We can't see it. But I guess we'll sleep better at night knowing it's there. I don't know. That's my thinking. I mean, if the straws in the drink are the analogy we're using, let's put some at different levels. Is my philosophy. I think that's the feeling of most of the people in the basin as well.
Commissioner Freehold.
Blake, I just have a couple of questions. The Dockham, how deep do you have to go to reach the Dockham, and how deep is it to the bottom of the Dockham?
So the Dockham, and I don't have all the information in front of me as to where everything's at. The Dockham in the area that I last drilled was around 600 feet. And from what the McLaughlin study shows, it could very well be 900 feet in saturated thickness. And that's an incredible amount of water storage that lays primarily beneath us. It doesn't, the Ogallala spans across several states. The Dakota Cheyenne spans across even more. And they're all downhill from us. And, everybody knows that there's two directions water runs. It runs towards money and it runs downhill. And so, we don't have a lot of money there, so it's not running back uphill towards us. So the Dockham is a resource that basically we have that very few other water using districts have underneath them.
I have one other question, Blake. How many irrigators draw out of the Ogallala as compared to the The Dockham is, as you say, almost untapped, right?
Correct. Total number of wells in the Ogallala. Remember that?
You know, I don't remember, my best estimate was about 10% of current irrigation is coming out of the Ogallala and others in Cheyenne, Dakota, and now the Dockham.
Very, very little out of the Ogallala. It hasn't been an adequate source of irrigation for, I mean, I've only been irrigating for, 20 years, but probably for at least 20 years before that, it hasn't really been a very adequate source of irrigation. Most of the wells have been Dakota Cheyenne wells, and more recently we're putting some through the Dockham. I'd say maybe, 2 to 3% maybe at best go into the Dockham.
Yeah.
That would be my guess.
And what production do you get out of the irrigation wells that pull out of the Ogallala?
Me personally, zero. If I stick a half horsepower pump down in there, I could pull, 5 to 10 gallons a minute, probably 15. Some places 20 to 30. But the Ogallala, it really is not and hasn't been an adequate source of irrigation. I don't know. There are probably places that are pulling out of it. I would guess that they get a little bit of alluvial water in that as well, just surface recharge, things like that. But very few wells in the Ogallala are going to be productive for irrigation.
So correct me if I'm wrong, you're stating that irrigation impacts stock wells and domestic wells very minimally. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is what the McLaughlin study shows, and the data that we've looked at certainly indicates that.
Okay, thank you.
Was there another question? Commissioner Tietmeyer.
Has the management district implemented any conservation measures?
Turn your microphone, Scott.
Has the management district discussed or implemented any conservation measures?
Recently, well, I'll just tell you that the management district has not been active for several years. And so we just recently reactivated the district. And, this has been what's been on our plate for that time, for the time that we've been back active. And so some of those discussions have been made. As far as we know, there are programs. From my time on the commission, I learned an incredible amount from Deb Daniels about some of the programs going on in the Northern High Plains and in the Republican River watershed. And so we know there are some programs out there that we would like to look into and see if we can get them active in our area. But as to what the local district has been able to do, it's just been this, for the last, I don't know when it was we officially got our district reactivated, but.
Are there any active measuring of water wells at this time?
There are. Chris would be able to speak a lot more on that, I suppose, because.
I'll point to Kevin Donegan and ask how many wells, Kevin, do you have a rough idea, or Andy, how many wells we're measuring down in Southern High Plains?
Per aquifer or in general?
Oh, yeah, per aquifer and overall.
On the fly, we have a map pulled up here that we just were reviewing, but yeah, I think it's somewhere around 80 that we have total throughout the basin as part of our annual monitoring program. Per aquifer, that varies widely, but at a glance, 20 Ogallala, 30 or 40 in the Dakota Cheyenne, and maybe another 20 in the Dockham. Let me just preface, that's the main aquifer. Most of the wells encounter most of the units as they go down, are screened across most of the units.
So do you feel that the taxpayers in the district would be served well by some management using that data to maybe create a conservation plan?
Well, yes, I do. I mean, I don't have any problem with that. However, I would state that currently the taxpayers we don't have a mill levy. We actually have no funding that comes into our district. So
you're not collecting any taxes?
We don't collect any taxes. We don't charge irrigators. Currently we don't, and the feelings, and you can see at the meeting when it was asked if we would like to have a study done, people really wanted a study done. But when it was asked if someone wanted to pay taxes for that, I believe it was Mr. Dawson that gave us an absolutely not. So, to do some of those things, we would have to either implement a mill levy, which had to be voted on, or have a membership. I'm pretty new to the role. I don't know the legal ins and outs of what we can or can't do to collect funding.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one more individual wants to speak. Are there any more questions of the commission? Commissioner Noble.
Thank you. Just quickly, you mentioned that your board unanimously opposed the concept of closing the basin. We've gotten various other alternative proposals here before us. I was just curious if your board had considered any of the other alternatives, such as limiting the amount that can be irrigated per acre, or using this formula that was proposed in the 2002 report for calculating water use limits and that sort of thing, or if that's something that your board hasn't been able to consider yet.
Well, none of that has come up. This is all new pretty much to me, today, really. So no, this has been what's been, at the forefront for us is the complete closure of the basin. What other options might be out there? Everyone on the board, I think, would be open to discuss. We're not taking a hard line on discussing things that might be beneficial, but right now we are taking a hard line on this. We can see this is something that would impact us not only now, but it impacts us greatly, moving forward. So,
great, thanks.
Commissioner Keeler.
I just want a clarification on the number that you gave on your document. You said 19 million. Was that acre foot that was stored in there? 19 million number?
Yes, that's according to the McLaughlin study. That's 19,266,500 acre feet.
That was in what year?
2002 was that study.
Thank you.
Any more questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Fowler.
Yes, thanks for being here. And I have a question. Do you know, and I don't expect an answer today, but consider your eligibility as a groundwater management district to be fiscally qualified for instance, all the grants that are available? I find that for the whole conversation we're having today about this issue, petitioner and or the groundwater management district, it's an opportunity, as Commissioner Paltner pointed out, to truly understand what you have. Coming against an argument and being for an argument, you need data to support both ends of that spectrum, in my opinion. So I think there could only be an opportunity to head off what our state is experiencing in the West, for that matter, in the context of drought. And you hate to be in a position where you're not able to make decisions anymore because you don't have control over that physical availability of that water. So I just like to encourage investigating, how you can be a part of data collection and awareness of the basin, so you can inform people that are opposing or petitioning, it can only benefit everybody in the long run, and your kids and their kids for that water. So I just, there's a reactive thing going on here, but there's no data really to come forward on either side to be comfortable in knowing what your resources. It's just a comment, you don't have to.
Well, I just want to state that I completely agree. And in my notes, when, you know, remember who it was that brought up the grant money available, I wrote it down and put a star next to it so that we can start looking into that. Because that is something, I mean, that's what we want. We want to operate on data and facts and not emotion. And that's where I think, you know, the petitioning group has been operating is on emotion. And we want as much information as we can get, honestly. And I guess that's going to lead me to a question for you, because this, you know, the engineering side of things, that's your background, correct? Would you, how much faith would you put in 21-year-old research?
I would revisit the report to understand, you know, the assumptions and the data that they use to make the determinations. I wouldn't comment on whether or not I would rely on that moving forward or not, but it's definitely a good report that informed a lot of decisions at the time, so it definitely just need to be revisited. It could be completely applicable really good, but I haven't dug into it to find out what factors could have changed to inform the conclusions.
Sure.
So.
Well, that's how we've been treating it, is as, you know, it's the best, most recent we have, and it's very comprehensive, and I think it was a very well done study. But, you know, we all know that things change, you know, over the course of 20 years. And a lot of things have, there's a lot of technology being developed.
If there's no other questions, appreciate your comments here today. Thank you, Mr. Ford.
Thank you, Commission. And I really want to stress that how much we appreciated you guys coming down and you know, setting up that meeting for us. It was, we think it was really helpful for us as a community. So thank you again.
Okay, is there anyone else who wants to speak in opposition to the petition? Go ahead. When you're seated, if you would state your name for the record, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wes McKinley. Heard a lot of technical data, all reserved for the hearing. A lot of that that's given is what is required for the hearing. Not a whole lot's been submitted to you because enough to know we need a rule change. Tim Hume on Eagle Island, the Groundwater Management District. Is Tim a member of the Groundwater Management District?
Wes, are you speaking in opposition to the petition? Because your time to speak in support of it's passed.
No, I'm asking a question.
Yeah. No, I'm not a member of the Groundwater
All right, thank
Management
you.
District.
Red Willie is the president of that. Now, when you heard all this testimony, you heard Alan Curtis. Alan Curtis represents the Groundwater Management District. He said that. I want you to consider when you were confirmed by the Senate in April of 2021, Don Corn held up the law book. Look at statute 3790-127. Look through 3790-122, 23, 24, 25. Does this commission recognize the Southern High Plains Groundwater Management District as a corporate government subdivision formed for the purpose of assisting?
Mr. McKinley, just a minute here. Are you speaking in favor or against the petition?
I'm in favor of the petition, but I'm asking you, just if you have considered, have you decided? Because if you will look at those statutes, I say, in order for the Groundwater Management District to exist, there is these statutes they must go through. If they have not done that, Lake Willie carried a petition to get 15% of the votes. You look through those rules, those laws enacted by the legislature, If they follow those, is the Groundwater Management District a legal government corporate subdivision of Colorado? Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none. Is there anyone else left that would like to speak in opposition to the petition?
Pardon?
Is there anyone left that would like to speak in opposition to the petition?
I don't think it can get that far.
Is there anyone left that would like to speak to the petition? Okay, the comments for consideration of the petition are closed. We've heard a great deal of information. I know that we're up against the clock of the noon hour. I think it'd be beneficial if we could have this conversation now before breaking for lunch. Is there any opposition to that amongst the commission? Okay, so to that end, you've heard a lot of testimony here today. You've heard a lot of comments. What's some of the conversations? What are your thoughts or concerns as a commission? Commissioner Keeler.
Tim's covered it. I've watched it for a long time, and our basin is over appropriated. Most basins are. The wreck will come. I don't know if it's our duty to stop the wreck or watch it or advise against it, or it's a tough call from our chair, but the wreck will come. I looked at just doing the numbers. If there's 19 million acre foot there, that lasts in 59 years without any more wells. That's figured 250 acre foot per well. Seems like a long time, but if you're investing in land, you want your community to live for 200 years, I don't know.
Just a point of clarification I would make here from the chair's position. I don't know that we're really considering whether or not to close the basin on the data. What we are here to discover or discuss is the petition that's in front of us. We'll begin the rulemaking procedure. Is the petition complete? I think that's the matter before our commission. Does anybody see that differently? Concerns, comments? Commissioner Noble?
Thank you. I guess I just wanted to say, there have been numerous protested applications for determination of water right in this basin, and each time the objecting parties have wanted to use those proceedings as a means to discuss whether or not the basin should be closed. And each time we have said consistently that those individual proceedings with respect to individual wells are not the appropriate place to do that, but really a rulemaking procedure is the appropriate place to consider whether or not that should be done. And so I want to commend the petitioners for attempting to follow the process that I think we have explained to them is the appropriate process for determining whether or not any of the rules related to the basin should be changed. However, I think that we're in a position right now where we don't have a lot of information to go on, and more information would help us to have a process that's more reliable in terms of what rule changes should be considered, and then it would also help us to determine what our position would be on those various proposals. And I'm not quite sure we're there yet. I do fully support continued informal stakeholder discussions on these issues, and I also support the possibility of additional study if that's possible. And I don't know if that's something that the district can take the lead on, or if that's something that even the commission could move forward with getting additional data. But I do think that would be very helpful so that we can make informed decisions. And I guess I'm just not quite at a position where I think that we could make informed decisions. If we were to start the formal rulemaking process today, we'd be operating in the dark, it seems like, in some respects. So that's my current thinking about it.
Thank you for that. Any other comments? Commissioner Frigoff?
I agree with Commissioner Noble that I think we're dealing with an incomplete petition at this time. And my question to the petitioners, if the management district would do a study on availability of water, would that help you and make you feel more comfortable that you could make an informed decision on your aquifer situation?
I think it would be helpful, but on the other hand, I don't know how long that's going to take. Is that going to put another 3 years on the, add 3 years to the 22 years already, 21 years since the last study? And I think the last study shows that there's a problem. And I think we've got a chance to address the problem. A study would be good, but we're going to miss a chance to study if we don't go ahead with the rule change.
Commissioner Ballard?
Yes, thank you. I concur with Commissioner Knowles. The data to really bring forward into the initiating the rulemaking for Mr. Curtis kind of covered a lot of the procedural aspects of that data to help make a decision to initiate that process. I think we need to get more robust with that petition.
Other comments? Commissioner Pollard?
Thank you, Chairman. Blake, if you guys, we operate, the Plains Groundwater Management District, we operate on a fee per acre foot on a permit. Just throwing that out there for future funding. I don't know, do you have, I'm assuming you don't even have that, is that correct?
That's correct. We currently do not have that.
Any funding? That makes it tough.
It does. All of our, we have a small amount of capital, which was all generated from our previous managers doing the well measurements and getting that funding from the state, and they donated their time to the district to build that capital.
Thank you. A lot of thoughts on this, Mr. Chairman. 11B says, with rulemaking based on the petition to close the basin. I don't believe that we have a complete petition in front of us to consider. That's not to say that there can't be one in the future. I was hoping Commissioner Noble would go on ahead, but I think he was leading up to something. We appreciated the petitioner's persistence, but we've also suggested that it would be, we think, in your best favor to get legal help, and I think that would really bring something to the table that we haven't seen up to this point. I believe this study that you referred to, Angie, is I would wholeheartedly agree with that, because this morning I've heard that there's going to be enough water in the Ogallala for domestic and livestock use. But I've also heard that, well, we're not sure what holds up the Dockham, or the water in the aquifer of the Ogallala and the Cheyenne and the Dakota. Well, could it be that the Dockham, that is the top of the Dockham? And there's been talk about, well, there's recharge. Where's the recharge coming from into the Dockham? Is it leading out of the two upper layers? So that makes me concerned about the statement, well, there'll always be room for domestic and livestock use. if we're draining that top, then those folks are gonna be forced to drill deeper as well. And I'm not saying we need to shut the basin down, but I really believe that this is such a unique situation, because as Dave alluded to, we're past it. We're seeing well, those of us in my area, the Northern High Plains Basin, we're already at the scene of the accident, okay? Don't do that. Allow yourself, be open-minded, have those discussions. And I've said it before, continue those stakeholder meetings. That's so valuable, because even I can learn something new, and I think that's a valuable piece to that stakeholder conversation, because the opposition despises those that have it, and those that have it don't want to give it up for any, and I get it. But at some point, somehow, those two sides have to come together and figure out a solution. Otherwise, if nobody's willing to compromise, then we're no better than what we despise that happens on a daily basis in Washington, D.C. Everybody's got to win. Well, in this case, if you wait long enough, everybody's going to lose. There will be no winners. So I strongly suggest the stakeholder process continue. And I'm assuming the staff is willing to do that, because this commission, we need more help. We need more information. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any comments from the commission online?
This is Miguel. I'd like to make one. I know from my experience here in the Rio Grande Basin, for one, I was not a part of the discussions of when our area was going through sub-districts, but I do know that getting ways to have all parties, figure out what is fair and what is needed is very difficult. It's not an easy task, but I feel like there's not enough information, like the rest of the commissioners have, is that there's not enough information. But getting studies done, updating the study. I know today there is a lot more technology than there was 20 or 21 years ago. I feel like more information is needed from my point of view. And I know it's difficult, but there is funding mechanisms that the community can try to do, and also try to go after grant monies, and there's ways. I know those conversations aren't easy, but I do feel like where there's a will, there's a way. And if we need these answers right away, I think there's a way of getting a lot of this studies done in a timely manner so that both parties can have all the information that's needed. And I feel like I don't have all the information today either with this. I feel like it's not enough. And so I am strongly encouraged to try to get all parties to try to come up with a way to funding, grant monies, and within the community trying to get everything together so that they can fund the studies. I know it's not easy, and I know some are limited and some have enough, but there's got to be a way that I think that we can get some of these studies funded and completed in a timely manner that would give us the information. And maybe we'd be all surprised at what these studies find, or we could be running into a wreck. We never know. Water and this, I don't fully understand it, but I believe that by answering those questions, I think we can make better decisions at a later time.
Thank you, Commissioner Diaz. Is there anyone else who'd like to make a comment from the commission online?
Mr. Chair, I'd like just to make a couple comments real quickly. I really appreciate the discussion here today. I'm lucky enough that I get to travel all around the state of Colorado, meeting with farmers and ranchers that are really dealing with water scarcity, particularly those that are dependent on groundwater pumping, concerned for the next generation or two of farmers or ranchers in their communities, will there be enough water? So I mention that just to say that I kind of agree with the sentiments of my fellow commissioners that here's an opportunity for additional study to get a better understanding of the status of the groundwater aquifer today. And as I mentioned, no guarantees that it'll be the right fit, but definitely CWCB has various grant programs. They do require matching requirements, but definitely advise that folks reach out to our staff. And I think Eric Sky, also on the commission with us, will have some information on that he can send out. So that could be one possibility for funding additional study. And then I just want to say, this conversation I think does really need to continue. Again, as my fellow commissioners noted, if the issue doesn't at least get understood and addressed early and often, it can be pretty devastating for a community. So I hope that, that kind of stakeholder engagement and those conversations on a local level continue. So thank you.
Any other comments from individuals on the commission? Okay, seeing none. I think we have a choice to make here. As I see it, we can choose to consider the petition, we can choose to deny the petition, or we can take no action at all. And I might ask Jen for her comments relative to that decision as well.
Thank you, Chairman Arnish. I think I'd like to clarify in terms of the action to agree to move forward with the petition. I think that could look, it could go a couple different ways. I think either the commission could vote on whether to move forward with the formal Secretary of State's process and kick off that more formal aspect of a rulemaking, or could vote on just going forward with the more informal stakeholder process, continuing that more informal route before really deciding whether or not to do a formal rulemaking.
That's why it's always good to refer to the attorney next to you, because she puts it in much sharper focus. Any questions of Jen for that? So what's the will of the commission? What would you like to do in this matter? Commissioner Noble.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would make a motion that we table the formal rulemaking process, but that we support continued informal stakeholder discussions on this issue, and that take up the formal process at a later date to be determined after more information has been obtained.
You want the formality of a tabled motion then? We would have to take it off the table at a subsequent meeting.
Yes, I think we should table the petition this time.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Commissioner Fowler and Commissioner Friedhoff, yes? Discussion.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question about Commissioner Noble's motion?
Please, go ahead.
And maybe this is something for Ms. Bailey to comment on, but Commissioner Noble, could you describe the difference between tabling the petition that's before you right now and just denying it with direction that petitioners bring a new, more certain petition forward at a future date after further stakeholder meetings, after more data has been gathered? And the reason I ask is probably more procedural, or just for clarity. If there is, as we say, a tabled petition, is that something that needs to be dealt with someday? And it's only that petition that can be considered not a new amended, sorry, shouldn't say new amended, but a new petition that is clear on what's really being asked for by the petitioners. That was sort of a long-winded question, Commissioner Noble, but
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. In light of those concerns, maybe it is cleaner to deny the petition and then allow for a new petition to be brought once additional stakeholder processes has occurred. So I think I would amend my motion, or am I not allowed to do that?
I can take the discretion of the chair and ask you to withdraw your motion if it's friendly to the second.
Okay, I'll withdraw my motion.
Is it friendly to the second?
Withdraw my second.
Okay, motion withdrawn.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Now you can go ahead.
Okay, and now I'll make a new motion that we deny the petition before us and that we support continued informal stakeholder meetings related to the issues contained in the petition at this time. So,
Okay, is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Commissioner Fowler. Discussion. Are we clear on what the motion does? Any questions to that?
May I ask a question?
Please.
This is Jen Neely. So as I read Rule 6A, whenever the commission contemplates rulemaking, public announcement may be made, and then the commission shall establish a representative group of participants with an interest in the subject of the rulemaking to participate in these more informal stakeholder meetings. So with Commissioner Noble's motion, I'm unclear now if we're still considering a rulemaking. If you've withdrawn the motion for a rulemaking, the original motion for the rulemaking was to continue to consider it, was just to table it. Now it doesn't feel like there's a rulemaking we're considering. We are just asking to move forward with the stakeholder process, but with no rulemaking going on. And I'm just seeking for clarification on what rule the stakeholders would be discussing at their stakeholder meeting if we're not moving forward with the petition.
I guess my understanding would be that the stakeholder process wouldn't be considering a specific rule proposal, but it would be a discussion of what are the options that could be considered. And I would expect that different options than even the ones we've been presented today might be discussed in light of, for example, if additional studies are done, those could inform different types of proposals that could be made. But at this point, I don't think there would be any formal rule proposal on the table. Does that answer your question?
You can answer my question, but I think it might make the stakeholder process difficult if there's not actually a rule being discussed and considered by the stakeholders. And if there's no, I've heard discussion seemingly across the board that more information would be nice, but without having that information at a stakeholder meeting for the stakeholders to discuss, it's hard to know. And I'm not quite sure we have the authority to direct stakeholders to meet. We can request it. I don't know if we can direct it under our rules if we don't have a rulemaking content.
Mr. Chair, may I ask another question or make another comment?
Please.
And actually, I'm just really going to impose on staff, Tracy Kozlov and Joanna Williams, if I could, and maybe the answer to Commissioner Noble's motion and Jen Neely's comments. The staff has done just an amazing job, I think, in facilitating the last couple stakeholder meetings and identifying the concerns that need to be addressed. So would it be appropriate as a solution, and practically speaking, to direct staff to continue facilitating the stakeholder processes? Because we do know generally that what we're really looking at is a solution to the concerns about the water supply status in the Southern High Plains Basin. And so that does give some sideboards on what the stakeholder meeting should be about. But I agree with Commissioner Noble that it could be different rules that are impacted by a new petition. And so if I could stop there, and I hate to put Ms. Kozloff or Ms. Williams on the spot, but maybe they could comment on whether they could continue that facilitating the stakeholder processes.
Ms. Kozloff, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In thinking about the situation here in the Southern High Plains, since we were able to have that stakeholder meeting and in preparation for this meeting, you know, one thing that came to mind to me that seemed like would be helpful to the community would be two things. Number one, an update to the 2002 McLaughlin report. I think we're all aware it's a very comprehensive report. I think it has a lot of good foundational information, but perhaps the community could benefit from an update to that. And I had also thought, along with that, an effort led by some facilitators to present to the community some of these, what are some options that the community could reasonably consider having updated data in front of them. And I had thought, well, you know, that could be one combined effort. Whatever the scientific organization who might be able to update the study and then conduct facilitated stakeholder meetings in the community to really see if it's possible for the community to come together around an option in front of them, being fully informed of, you know, the updated science. And so, you know, that's been my best idea, and certainly you guys are all aware that this would require funding. And we've talked about funding sources that are available, but they do require a local match, at least the funding available through the CWCB and either statewide or from the roundtables, which are regional sources of funding out of the Water Conservation Board. And so I guess I wanted to share that thought I've had with you all. But also, you know, in response to Commissioner Ryan's suggestion, I'm sure that staff would be willing to go down and hold an additional stakeholder meeting or two, but it feels like uncertain, you know, what are the options we would be trying to present the community with? What are the best choices in front of them? And so I wanted to just share my idea, I guess, around a more comprehensive update to the study, and could some type of true community facilitation process go hand in hand with that to try and bring the members of the community along to then come back to you all with more of a cohesive recommendation for a change to the rules, or that they don't want to change the rules.
Any questions of Ms. Kozloff? Commissioner Fowler.
The information that your coworkers pulled up over there, Kevin, I can't remember. All right. It's the 80 wells that are currently in this area of the state. Is there a way to bring that information and that data to the community? I know a lot of times we have very educated stakeholders, but at the same time, I'm in, you know, CDSS and your programs a lot, and I know how to, you know, use the data and inform decisions. But I just wondered, on the heels of what you were suggesting, which I think is a great idea to get to the community, but understanding the more recent 80 well data and information, I mean, it would take time to really sync that with the old study. I get that takes time, but what do we know now that's different, and where are the data gaps? Because when I'm talking to community members, it's helpful that here's what we do know, but here's what really needs to be uncovered, and this is how it's done, because it's a really overwhelming process if you're not aware of how to pull from what you know and what you don't know, and what does that mean? What's that time frame that Mr. Dawson, communicated? What's the dollar amount there to be able then to kind of move forward with kind of coming alongside what you're sharing, but where they need to go. I don't know if that makes sense, but I didn't know if your staff could try to help pull maybe some of that data. I know that Keith at that stakeholder meeting a couple of years ago did a really great job of summarizing, I think it was the 2002 report that he summarized. But I don't know if maybe that's something that can be built upon with some of this data. I don't know how often people look at that data and what does it mean. I'm thinking out loud, but trying to help the community is where I'm trying to go with my comments. But I appreciate your willingness to support the effort, whatever that looks like.
Any other? Commissioner Keeler.
Reading in the archives of the Republican River Basin, and this was years and years ago, they had a number that you could irrigate and recharge would take care of that. I'm not going to get into the number now because memory fails me, but there was a definite number that you could irrigate so many acres and the recharge would take care of it. It'd be a ground zero, if you will. Is there anything like that on the Southern High Plains when they did designate their basin? I mean, a number like that with what Ms. Bowers has is, I mean, all the information we could give would help.
Yes, go ahead.
Going from memory, I think I can answer that question, but only in part. It's almost maybe in reverse, but the McLaughlin study described that at the rate of withdrawal that was occurring at the time, that there was a certain number of years of expected economic aquifer life left, and I'm going to kind of look to staff because I think there was a particular number for what was called the proven DOCM, and then a different number if you included what they were quite uncertain about, the lower DOCM below what they called the proven. And so going from memory, I want to say there was 50 years left in 2002, considering only the proven DOCM, and then so a much more uncertain estimate, including the lower portion of the DOCM, which I think was more in the order of 100 years. And sorry, didn't remember.
That's correct.
The top was 56.
That was for the upper DOCM, Jack. Let's have the facts, please. The lower DOCM is in excess of 100 years.
I just was talking about the upper.
Yep. Well, she wasn't, so.
I would like to draw this a little bit closer to the motion. We have a motion on the floor. Let's have comments relative to the motion so that we can expedite this a little bit more. So the motion is on the floor. Commissioner Noble, can you remind us?
I've forgotten what it was. I believe the motion was to continue the informal process without setting strict guidelines as to what that is, and defer to the staff on that point, but deny the petition that's before us at this point in time.
Is that how you understand it as the second? Okay. Any other comments relative to the motion that is on the floor right now? Are we ready to vote then? Okay, all those on the motion on the floor in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? I'll rule the motion carried. Thank you for your efforts on that. That That took a while to get through valuable information, and now I think we have a plan set before us to really crescendo into the next meeting. Just as a measure of housekeeping, is Nate Midcap still in?
He shows up. I don't know if he's still listening. Nate, are you there? If you can unmute, that would be great.
What do you think of our timing on the meeting now, Nate? Okay, we've only got a few more issues here. If you'll bear with me, we'll power through the end of the meeting here. New business, a selection of the August meeting location. In the packet that we were emailed out, Rick has compiled where we've been nearly the last 20, 25 years or so. Were there any recommendations that the commission could provide for our meeting in August? I believe, if memory serves me correct, I thought I wrote it down, but we're currently scheduled to meet August 18th, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any
So
recommendations?
if we go out of town, it would be the 17th and the 18th.
Yes. I know in the past, someone of the commission mentioned Mesa Verde. We're looking online, I believe it may be closed right now. They're doing something there. I saw that here the other night when I jumped on to review that location. I think they're under construction at some point. Any other thoughts? I might have one that I'd like to bring to everyone's attention. There is a water project going on in the northeastern corner of the state of Colorado called the Platte Valley Water Partnership. And it's a collaboration between some municipal interests and North Sterling Reservoir. I've heard Jim Young speak on this issue a number of times. I don't know what there's actually out there to tour other than what the concept is of bringing water from northeastern Colorado to the metropolitan area. That's one general thought. On the other hand, I don't know that all of us want to be in Sterling, Colorado in mid-August. That's the other side of it. Any other thoughts? Commissioner Noble?
I would say if we could find, I would say if we could find out if Mesa Verde is actually an option, I think that would be one to consider. I don't have internet connection, so I can't verify it. But the other thought I had, and I apologize, I didn't ask Commissioner T-Meyer ahead of time, but there seem to be a lot of issues going on in the Crow Creek area right now. And I wonder if it might make sense to visit that area based on some of the issues that have come up in the last few meetings.
I guess the board and I have discussed that. There's lodging that's 50 miles away. There's no real close lodging. Meals might be a problem. We'd love to sponsor you. It might not be the best choice as far as at this time. I know we do have a president of our board who's having some health issues, and so to get that done this year, it might be a little bit of a strain. But I appreciate the thought on it. We'll kind of keep working on it and try and make it happen, I guess. I'm under the impression no one wants to go into the Wyoming, and that's where the closest hotel would be. So then we're looking at moving back towards Greeley or someplace like that for meetings and things like that. So I think we need to spend a little more time on that.
Commissioner Higgins?
Yeah, I just would note that if we did decide to go to the Mesa Verde area, I know it's not in the state of Colorado, but the Nappy irrigation project is a pretty fascinating project to irrigate, I believe, 80 to 100,000 acres from a huge river water project, and I think I'm thinking about some potential long-term solutions that I've kind of talked about before. There may be a little bit out there, but as far as moving water from one place to another, it might give us some perspective on how that can happen. It's an extraordinary place. I was there probably 10 years ago now, and it was pretty extraordinary then. I suspect quite a bit more technology that we're just not aware of that would be instructive. But Again, that is in New Mexico, but not too far from Mesa Verde.
Commissioner Freon. Oh, here, okay. Tim's exactly right. I've been to the Nappy farm before. It's incredible. I don't know if we can go outside the state.
I don't believe we can go outside. Director Ryan, can we go outside of the state as part of the tour? Or stay outside of the state?
Well, I don't think it's a big problem. I think if our meeting location and our lodging is within the state, that's helpful. It probably gets a little more difficult if we're, at least for us state employees, if we're going outside of the state. We can check into that a little more. But what I'm understanding maybe from you all is that that's someplace not that far into New Mexico. Is that right? That we can travel to during the day?
Yeah, that's my belief, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Any other thoughts, Commissioner Fowler?
Thank you. I'm going to throw out, and I'm going to lean into our representatives there here from the state. Would there be any area of the state that we could look at that are involved in the system conservation pilot program, or any sort of, forward-thinking water conservation types of farms or properties, or I don't know, I'm just kind of throwing it out there, just like what's fresh right now and what our state is trying to do to help with water. It's Colorado River Basin. I'm just trying to think out loud if there would be any pilot projects or anything interesting to see based on any of your knowledge as an idea. Great.
Mr. Chair,
go ahead.
Commissioner Fowler, directly related to the SCPP, that might be difficult to really tie that together and identify a specific project, but I'm going to ask Assistant Director Romero Heaney. I think you're familiar with maybe in the Kremlin area, there might be some things going on that could be interesting for us in irrigation practices and so on. I think you've probably been closer to that than I have over the years, but I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, thank you, State Engineer Ryan. In the Kremling area, CWCB board member Paul Boucher, of course, has been leading on that. So, I mean, if the Groundwater Commission is interested in seeing, learning a little bit more about projects being done to conserve surface water and really understand that conserved consumptive use around surface water conservation programs, I mean, that could be a good location if that's what you had in mind, Commissioner Fowler.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Thank you for throwing out those ideas. It is super surface water, but it, in the bigger picture of our state's water, it's all hand in hand, surface and groundwater, so it's just an idea.
Tracy has a comment. Tracy?
Maybe just building on the potential of the Kremling area. I don't know if anyone here or online is aware, but Dr. Perry Cabot was doing research in that area on, I think, various different types of deficit irrigation or split season irrigation. He, I believe, works for Colorado State Extension, but out on the western slope. So maybe potential to combine those two. I'm not sure really how far apart that all is, but is anyone aware of Dr. Cabot's recent work?
I'll just add that's the same project I was referring to.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, anything by Dr. Perry Cabot is pretty fascinating and I think really of interest to the Groundwater Commission.
Okay, we've had a number of suggestions. We really need to make this decision here. So what's the will of the commission?
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think I figured out the status of Mesa Verde just by my quick Google search. It looks like they do have a
a road closure on the western side of the park, but it looks like a good portion of the park that does continue to be open. So in terms of, that's the main information I can tell from the internet right now.
Yeah, Dave?
I just have a question real quick. I mean, nothing to do with where you guys decide to go, but I know Paintbrush Hills is scheduled for the August meeting. And I was just wondering, as a part of housekeeping, that maybe we could move them like they were originally with Bennett to the November meeting. Because that's gonna be pretty cost prohibitive and a lot of cost for us to go to wherever that meeting is, if that hearing ultimately will be at the August meeting. So I was wondering if part of bookkeeping, you could move the Paintbrush Hills into the November meeting if you guys are gonna take your trip.
That's certainly possible. Dave, I don't think we can move Paintbrush Hills because they would have to be in agreement to that. So I don't know that we can just systematically move them to the November meeting because of distance. So that would have to be something that we would have to visit with the applicant on.
Okay. Well, I guess I would ask that the staff or under your direction would, under their kindness, move it to, I'm certain that they wouldn't want to travel that far for a hearing.
Sure.
But it was just a concern that, as we've all heard the districts and what money we have, that to travel that far for a hearing with our attorneys and engineers and hydrologists,
Yep.
it's cost prohibitive.
Yep, that's a point well taken. Thank you for raising that. Okay, what is the desire of the commission? Where would we like to hold our third quarter meeting? Any ideas? Commissioner Noble.
I wonder if maybe the Pueblo area might work in terms of accommodating parties that need to be there, and then we could also tour some facilities on the Arkansas River Basin while we were there.
When is the Colorado State Fair?
Right, during that time, probably.
I don't know.
I think it is, or next week.
Mr. Chair, may I make a comment?
Yes, please.
I was going to say something supportive of being in the Kremling area and maybe while we're in the vicinity, the Colorado River Connectivity Channel. It'll be interesting to see, but since the Arkansas was raised, I will have to go back several years when the Elkhart gave a tour of or gave an explanation of their multi-purpose project. And I'm not saying that correctly, but they have a project in the Buena Vista area. That's something that can be seen too. So that's supportive of that. Arkansas, I would say either Arkansas River or in the Kremling area.
Anybody have a strong feeling?
And normally I don't weigh in on this, but I'm just trying to give us a nudge.
Commissioner Keeler.
I've been in Kremling in August, and I've been in Pueblo in August. That's all I have to say.
That sounded like a motion.
I like Kremling, yes, that is a motion.
Okay, so we have a recommendation of Kremling as the August third quarter meeting. Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Second, discussion? All those in favor of the Kremling meeting area for third quarter 2023, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Dave, we will work with the applicant to see if they want to still be heard in August, and then let you know. Okay, public comment. Is there any public comment? Executive session. Mr. Stork said we didn't need one, so we're to that part of the agenda everybody's been looking for. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye. Those opposed, meeting is adjourned. Thank you for taking time out of your Friday, everyone, and enjoy the good weather and travel safe going home. We will see you back.
Recording